They fired on a rescue convoy, and Earth went to war without reluctance. Part 1. Captain Susan Miller stood on the bridge of the UESC medical frigate Asclepius, watching the stars streak by through the large viewport. Her ship, named after the ancient Greek god of medicine, was leading a convoy of 5 vessels on a critical rescue mission. "Captain, we're receiving the updated distress signal from Proxima Centauri 4, said Communications Officer Olivia Wright, her fingers moving quickly. Over her console, "The situation is deteriorating. They've lost another 200 colonists overnight to the illness." Susan's face remained calm, but her stomach tightened. 200 more dead. That brought the total to nearly 1,000, an entire settlement of hardworking families wiped out by a mysterious disease that had appeared just 2 weeks ago. "Acknowledged, Officer Wright. Send them our ETA and tell them to hold on. We're coming as fast as we can." Susan turned to the ship's chief medical officer who stood beside her, reviewing data on his tablet. "Alan, what do you make of the latest symptoms they've reported?" Dr. Alan Rogers frowned as he scrolled through the information. His normally cheerful face was serious. "It's unlike anything I've seen before. The rapid onset, the neurological, symptoms followed by organ failure. I've got my team working around the clock trying to find similarities to known pathogens, but so far, nothing matches." Susan nodded. That was why this mission was so critical. The Asclepius carried not only emergency medical supplies but also Earth's best viral specialists, epidemiologists, and advanced diagnostic equipment. The other 4 ships in the convoy transported food, water purifiers, temporary housing units, and additional medical personnel. If anyone could save the remaining colonists on Proxima Centauri 4, it was this team. "Captain, we're approaching the edge of Krell territory," announced Lieutenant Jack Peterson from the tactical station. The young officer's voice was steady, but Susan noticed his shoulders tense slightly. "On screen, Lieutenant." The main display shifted to show a map of their route. A red line marked the boundary of Krell space that they would need to cross. The Krell Dominion was known throughout the galaxy as territorial and suspicious of outsiders. However, 3 years ago, after lengthy negotiations, they had signed non-aggression pacts with Earth and several other major powers. "Have we received confirmation of our passage clearance?" Susan asked. "Yes, Captain," Olivia replied. "The Krell Border Authority granted us permission yesterday. We are to follow the designated corridor and maintain continuous broadcast of our humanitarian status." Susan nodded. "Make sure all ships in the convoy are clearly displaying the international medical symbols on their hulls. Broadcast our mission, status and manifest on all standard frequencies." "Already done, Captain," Olivia confirmed. "Engineering, what's our status?" Susan asked over the comm. Chief Engineer Sam Bennett's voice came through clearly. "Engines are running at peak efficiency, Captain. We can maintain our current speed through the Krell corridor without any issues." "Good work, Sam." Susan turned to her navigator. "Ensign Garcia, plot the exact course they've authorized. I don't want to deviate by even a kilometer." Maria Garcia, on her first deep space mission, nodded eagerly. "Yes, Captain. Course plotted and locked in." Susan looked around the bridge at her crew. They were good people dedicated to their mission of mercy. The Asclepius had responded to dozens of emergency situations over the past 5 years under her command, from natural disasters to disease outbreaks, always arriving with help and hope. "We'll be in and out of Krell space in under 6 hours, she said confidently. "Then it's a straight shot to Proxima Centauri 4. As the convoy approached the border, Susan felt the familiar tension that came with crossing into foreign territory. The Krell were not known for their warmth or flexibility, but surely even they understood the importance of a medical mission. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the Krell border station," Olivia announced. "Put it through." The view screen switched to show a Krell official, his gray-scaled face impassive, vertical pupils narrowing as he regarded Susan. "UES key. Vessel Asclepius, this is Border Control Officer Drax. Your convoy is cleared to proceed along the designated route. Any deviation will be considered a hostile act. You have 6 Earth hours to transit our territory." "Understood, Border Control," Susan replied politely. "We appreciate the Krell Dominion's cooperation in this humanitarian matter. We will adhere strictly to the approved path." The Krell officer didn't acknowledge her thanks, simply cutting the transmission. "Friendly bunch," Jack muttered. "They don't have to be friendly, Lieutenant. They just have to let us pass," Susan said. "All ships proceed at 3/4 speed, maintain formation, and stay exactly on the approved route." The 5 ships of the convoy moved in perfect alignment as they crossed into Krell space. The mood on the bridge grew more serious, everyone focusing intently on their tasks. Susan knew the Krell made them all nervous, but the mission came first. Every hour they delayed meant more lives lost on that colony. 2 hours into Krell territory, they entered a region known as the Narrow Corridor, a thin band of space between 2 Krell military zones. "Captain, I'm picking up some unusual energy readings," Jack reported suddenly, frowning at his console. Susan turned quickly. "Source?" Unable to determine, they're scattered throughout the sector. Jack's fingers moved rapidly over his controls. "Wait, ships decloaking, multiple Krell warships." "Hail them immediately," Susan ordered, keeping her voice calm despite the spike of alarm. "Remind them of our humanitarian status and clearance." Olivia worked frantically at her station. "Broadcasting on all frequencies, Captain." No response. Viewscreen showed 3 Krell battlecruisers materializing around them, their angular hulls bristling with weapons. "They're charging weapons," Jack shouted. "This has to be a mistake," Susan said. "Continue hailing them. All ships maintain course and speed. Do not take any action that could be interpreted as aggressive." "Captain, they're targeting us specifically," Jack reported, his voice tight with tension. Susan hit the ship-wide comm. "All hands brace for possible impact. Medical teams secure all patients and supplies." She turned to Olivia. "Send an emergency transmission to UESC command. Include our coordinates and—" The first blast hit the Asclepius before she could finish. The ship shuddered violently, alarms blaring throughout the bridge. "Direct hit to our starboard engine." Sam's voice came through the comm, nearly drowned out by the sound of explosions. "We've lost power to decks 3 through 7. Susan gripped her chair as another blast rocked the ship. "Evasive maneuvers. What about the rest of the convoy?" The view screen showed 2 of their ships already breaking apart under Krell fire, escape pods launching desperately from their hulls. "This is Captain Susan Miller of the UESC Asclepius," she shouted into the comm, trying one last time to reach the Krell. "We are on an approved humanitarian mission. We carry no weapons. Please cease fire." There was no response except another devastating blast that threw Susan to the deck. Blood ran down her face from a gash on her forehead. Through the smoke filling the bridge, she could see Ensign Garcia slumped over her console, not moving. "Abandon ship," Susan ordered, pulling herself up. "All personnel to escape pods immediately." Dr. Rogers was helping a wounded crew member. "Captain, the medical bay is hit. We have patients trapped down there." "Get as many out as you can," Susan ordered. She made her way to the emergency console and activated the ship's black box recorder. "This is Captain Susan Miller. The time is 14:37 hours, Earth Standard. Our medical convoy has been attacked without provocation by Krell forces while on an approved humanitarian mission through their territory. I hereby—" Another explosion tore through the bridge. Susan fell, feeling a sharp pain in her side. She looked down to see a metal shard protruding from her abdomen. With fading strength, she reached up and pressed the final button on the console, activating the emergency beacon that would broadcast the ship's last moments to any UESC vessel in range. Her last thought before darkness took her was of the sick colonists waiting for help that would never arrive. They fired on a rescue convoy, and Earth went to war without reluctance. Part 2. Dr. Alan Rogers felt the escape pod shake as it ejected from the dying Asclepius. Through the small viewport, he watched in horror as the medical frigate broke apart, secondary explosions tearing through its hull. The other ships in the convoy were already gone, reduced to scattered debris. "They're still firing," whispered Ensign Maria Garcia. Blood trickled from a cut on her cheek as she stared out the viewport. "They're firing on the escape pods." Alan pulled her away from the window. "Don't look." 5 other survivors crowded the small pod with them. 2 nurses, an engineer, and 2 junior officers. They all wore the same shell-shocked expression. "What about Captain Miller?" one of the nurses asked. Alan shook his head. She stayed to activate the emergency beacon. I don't think she made it out. The pod shuddered again as something exploded nearby. Alan knew it was another escape pod being hit. The Krell were systematically destroying every trace of the convoy, including the survivors. Engine power at 20%, reported Sam Bennett, the chief engineer. His hands worked furiously at the pod's simple controls. I might be able to get us out of their sensor range if I route power from life support. Do it, Alan said. We can manage with reduced oxygen for a while. Sam nodded grimly and began rewiring the pod's systems. The lights dimmed and the temperature dropped immediately, but the pod surged forward away from the debris field. Everyone stay quiet and still, Alan instructed. Minimize your oxygen consumption. The 6 survivors huddled together in the cramped space as the escape pod drifted away from the attack site. Hours passed in tense silence. Occasionally, Sam would check the rudimentary sensors looking for signs of pursuit. I think we're clear, he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. How long will the pod's beacon work? Maria asked. 3 days at most, Sam replied. After that, he didn't need to finish. After that, they would be just another piece of space debris, likely to drift forever undetected. Someone will find us, Alan said with more confidence than he felt. The Asclepius got off a distress call. UESC will send ships to investigate. But as the hours stretched into a full day, and then 2, hope began to fade. Their oxygen supply dwindled, and they took turns sleeping to conserve what remained. Alan kept checking the vital signs of the injured, using the pod's minimal medical supplies to keep them stable. On the 3rd day, Maria suddenly gasped. There's a ship. They all crowded around the small viewport. In the distance, a vessel was approaching, its running lights visible against the blackness of space. Is it Krell? One of the junior officers asked fearfully. Sam squinted at the tiny screen showing sensor readings. No, it's one of ours. UESC patrol ship. Relief washed over the survivors as the ship grew closer. Its searchlights swept the area, clearly looking for survivors. Sam activated their emergency beacon to full power, using the last of their reserve energy. They've spotted us, he announced as the UESC ship changed course toward them. We're going to make it. 2 hours later, Alan sat in the medical bay of the UESC patrol ship Sentinel, a thermal blanket wrapped around his shoulders. The ship's doctor had treated their injuries and oxygen deprivation. Now a stern-faced officer named Admiral Victor Clark was questioning them. You're certain the Krell gave no warning before they attacked? Admiral Clark asked, his voice hard. None, Alan confirmed. We had proper clearance. We were broadcasting our humanitarian status. Captain Miller tried hailing them repeatedly when they appeared. Admiral Clark nodded, his jaw tight. And the convoy was clearly marked with medical symbols. No weapons aboard any vessel. We were a rescue mission, Alan said, his voice cracking with emotion. We were bringing medicine and supplies to a dying colony. The only things on those ships were doctors, nurses, relief workers, and supplies. The Admiral looked at each of the survivors. You 6 are all we've found so far, out of 5 ships with over 300 personnel. Maria began to cry softly. One of the nurses put an arm around her shoulders. The captain, Alan said, remembering Susan Miller's last order to him. She activated the black box recorder and emergency beacon before the bridge was hit. If you can recover it, we already have, Admiral Clark interrupted. A search team found it among the debris. The recording is intact along with all the ship's logs. We have proof of everything. The clearance from the Krell, your humanitarian status, the unprovoked attack. He turned to a screen on the wall and pressed a button. The screen lit up with a transmission showing the face of a woman in a UESC uniform. Dr. Rogers, Admiral Clark said, this is Lieutenant Commander Nicole Barnes from Intelligence. She has some questions about the Krell ships that attacked you. The woman on the screen nodded. Dr. Rogers, I know this is difficult, but can you describe the Krell vessels? Their configuration, weapons, anything you noticed? Alan closed his eyes, trying to remember details through the haze of terror. 3 large cruisers. They decloaked around us in a triangular formation. They targeted the Asclepius first, then the other ships. They knew exactly which ship was leading the convoy, Sam added. They went for our engines first, then communications. It was a coordinated attack, not random. Commander Barnes nodded, making notes. This suggests it wasn't a rogue commander, this was planned. Admiral Clark's expression darkened further. We've attempted to contact the Krell government. They're claiming your convoy violated their territory and was carrying weapons. They say they acted in self-defense. That's a lie, Maria burst out, her fists clenched. We had permission. We were following their approved route exactly. We know, Admiral Clark said grimly. The evidence is clear. Captain Miller's final log entry, the ship's navigation records, the communications. It all confirms your story. He turned back to the screen. Commander Barnes, I want all the data from the black box transmitted to Earth immediately, along with my full report. Yes, Admiral. I'll also prepare a tactical analysis of the Krell forces based on the survivors' accounts. After the commander signed off, Admiral Clark faced the survivors again. We're taking you back to Earth. President Martinez and the United Earth Council need to hear your testimony directly. What about Proxima Centauri IV? Alan asked. The colony is still waiting for medical aid. Another relief mission is being assembled, Admiral Clark assured him, with a military escort this time. The Admiral's comm unit beeped. He checked it and his face grew even more serious. The Krell have issued a statement to the galactic community claiming Earth vessels were smuggling weapons through their territory. They're trying to justify their actions. Sam's face reddened with anger. 347 people? Dead and they're spreading lies? Admiral Clark nodded slowly. The Krell miscalculated badly. They thought they could destroy a medical convoy and create a cover story that would be believed. They didn't count on survivors or the black box. He looked out the viewport toward the debris field where the remains of the convoy drifted. They also didn't understand what would happen when Earth learned that someone had fired on a rescue mission. His voice was quiet, but filled with cold certainty. The Krell are about to learn why that was their biggest mistake. They fired on a rescue convoy, and Earth went to war without reluctance. Part 3 President Elaine Martinez stood at the window of her office in the United Earth Government headquarters, looking out at the gathered crowd below. Thousands of people had assembled in the plaza, holding candles despite the daylight. Many carried pictures of those who had died aboard the rescue convoy. She turned as her aide announced the arrival of her cabinet members. General Paul Thompson entered first, his military uniform crisp, his face grim. Behind him came Secretary of State Daniel Lewis, who had always been the voice of caution and diplomacy in her administration. The council vote was unanimous, Madam President, Secretary Lewis said, his normally calm voice tight with emotion. All 193 nation representatives voted in favor of military action against the Krell. President Martinez nodded slowly. In the 12 years since the formation of the United Earth Government, there had never been complete agreement on any military action. Until now. The evidence is undeniable, General Thompson added. Lieutenant Commander Barnes and her team have analyzed the black box recordings and all ship logs. The attack was deliberate and planned. The Krell targeted the medical frigate first, then methodically destroyed the rest of the convoy and fired on escape pods. President Martinez closed, her eyes briefly. 347 dead. Doctors, nurses, engineers, relief workers. The global reaction has been intense, Secretary Lewis said. Protests outside Krell embassies on every continent. The medical community is particularly outraged. 17 of Earth's top epidemic specialists were on that convoy. And the colony on Proxima Centauri IV? The president asked. We dispatched a heavily armed relief mission immediately after receiving news of the attack. General Thompson replied. They arrived yesterday. Over 1,500 colonists have died from the disease, but our medical teams believe they can save the remaining population now that they've reached them. The president walked to her desk and picked up a tablet displaying images of the 6 survivors. Dr. Alan Rogers and the others had been brought back to Earth and had testified before the United Earth Council, sharing their first-hand accounts. of the unprovoked attack. What about the Krell claims that our ships were carrying weapons? Secretary Lewis shook his head. We've released the complete manifests of all 5 ships to the galactic community, along with inspection records that verify they carried only medical supplies and humanitarian aid. Even the Krell's allies are questioning their story. And their leadership, the president asked? Still maintaining their false narrative, General Thompson said. Our intelligence suggests there may be internal divisions. Some Krell officials appear uncomfortable with the attack, but Supreme Leader Kazak is standing firm. President Martinez sat down at her desk and studied the military plans General Thompson had prepared. She had always pursued diplomatic solutions, building Earth's reputation as a peaceful member of the galactic community. But this attack changed everything. The UESC fleet is positioned and ready, Madam President, General Thompson said. We have 3 carrier groups prepared to enter Krell space within hours of your order. And what is your assessment of our military capabilities against the Krell? She asked. Our technology is more advanced in several key areas, the general replied. The Krell rely heavily on cloaking and surprise attacks. Now that we're prepared for these tactics, we have effective countermeasures. Additionally, the data recovered from the black box has given us valuable intelligence on their weapon systems. Secretary Lewis looked concerned. The Krell have never faced a full-scale war with a major power. We don't know how they'll respond when cornered. That's why precision is key to our strategy, General Thompson said. We target their military installations only, minimize civilian casualties, and cut off their ability to continue hostilities as quickly as possible. President Martinez stood up. It was time for her address to the people of Earth and the wider galactic community. Her communications team had prepared a careful speech, but she had rewritten much of it herself. The broadcast studio in the lower level of the government complex had been prepared. As she took her position behind the podium bearing the United Earth Government seal, President Martinez thought again of the images from the black box recorder, the medical ships clearly marked with the ancient symbols of healing, being methodically destroyed by Krell warships. The red light on the camera illuminated and she began. Citizens of Earth and members of the galactic community, 3 days ago a humanitarian convoy dispatched to bring medical aid to a colony suffering from a deadly outbreak was deliberately and brutally attacked in Krell space, despite having received proper clearance for transit. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. 347 people dedicated to saving lives were killed. These were not soldiers. They were doctors, nurses, and aid workers. They carried medicine, not weapons. They brought hope, not threats. Images appeared on screens beside her, pictures of the convoy ships with their clear medical markings followed by pictures of some of the people who had been aboard. The Krell government has claimed our ships carried weapons and violated their territory. This is false. We have released all records proving the humanitarian nature of this mission to the galactic public record. Her voice grew stronger. Throughout our history as a spacefaring civilization, Earth has pursued peace. We have built hospitals on distant worlds, offered aid to any who needed it, and respected the sovereignty of all species. We signed treaties in good faith with the Krell Dominion, treaties they have now violated in the most egregious manner possible. She looked directly into the camera. We did not seek this conflict. But when faced with such a clear act of aggression against those whose only mission was to heal and help, we cannot and will not stand idle. The United Earth Council has voted unanimously to authorize military action against the Krell Dominion. The President's expression was resolute, but not vengeful. Our response will be precise and proportional. We will target military installations, not civilian populations. We seek justice, not revenge. We aim to ensure that no peaceful mission will ever again be attacked with impunity. She took a deep breath. To the Krell leadership, you have one final opportunity to acknowledge your actions, hold the responsible parties accountable, and make reparations to the families of those killed. You have 6 hours to respond. President Martinez's final words were delivered with quiet intensity. To those watching throughout the galaxy, let it be known that Earth goes to war today without reluctance but with absolute resolve. We came in peace. We were bringing aid to the suffering. The Krell responded with unprovoked violence. We will now respond with justified force. As the broadcast ended, she turned to General Thompson. Deploy the fleet. Begin operations as planned. To the lair. General nodded and immediately began issuing orders through his secure comm link. Secretary Lewis looked at the president with newfound respect. In all my years of diplomacy, I never thought I'd see Earth go to war during my lifetime. Nor did I, President Martinez replied quietly. But there are times when the only way to preserve peace is to demonstrate that there are consequences for violating it. The Krell made a terrible miscalculation when they fired on that convoy. Outside, the crowd in the plaza had grown larger as people watched her address on large public screens. Where there had been shock and grief before, there was now a sense of grim determination. Earth was going to war. They fired on a rescue convoy, and Earth went to war without reluctance. Part 4 Fleet. Admiral Stephen Grant stood on the bridge of the UESC flagship Defender, watching the tactical display as Earth's warships moved into position. The main fleet consisted of 3 carrier groups, each with a complement of fighters and support vessels. 2 additional stealth destroyer groups followed at a distance, prepared to strike from unexpected vectors. The Krell have not responded to President Martinez's ultimatum, reported his communications officer. The 6-hour window expired 10 minutes ago. Admiral Grant nodded. He hadn't expected the Krell to surrender or apologize. Their culture viewed such actions as weakness. All ships, this is Fleet Admiral Grant, he said into the fleet-wide comm. Operation Righteous Response is now active. Proceed according to plan. The first wave consisted of stealth vessels, designed to penetrate deep into Krell territory undetected. Captain Ryan Johnson commanded the lead ship, the destroyer Nemesis. All systems dark. Stealth protocols engaged, Captain Johnson reported. From the Nemesis. We are crossing into Krell space now. On the Nemesis, the crew operated in near silence, the bridge illuminated only by the soft glow of essential displays. The ship's revolutionary stealth technology masked not only their visual presence but also their energy signature. Target in range, reported the tactical officer on the Nemesis. Krell Central Communications Hub. No sign they've detected us. Captain Johnson studied the readouts showing the massive installation hanging in orbit around a small moon. This facility coordinated all Krell military communications across their territory. Prepare the EMP warheads, he ordered. Target their power core and transmission arrays. Fire when ready. The Nemesis launched its specialized missiles, designed not to destroy, but to disable. The missiles struck with precision, releasing powerful, electromagnetic pulses that surged through the Krell facility, overloading its systems. Direct hits, confirmed the tactical officer. Their systems are going dark. Similar strikes were happening simultaneously across Krell space as the other stealth destroyers targeted key military infrastructure. Admiral Grant watched the reports, flowing in from each vessel. Phase 1 complete, he announced to his command staff. 78% of targeted Krell installations disabled. No casualties reported. Lieutenant Commander Nicole Barnes, who had analyzed the black box data from the destroyed convoy, nodded with satisfaction. Their command and control network is severely compromised. They can no longer coordinate their fleet movements effectively. Admiral, Grant turned to his next objective. Begin Phase 2. Alert Major Evans and her Marines to prepare for boarding operations. Aboard the troop carrier Valor, Major Lisa Evans addressed her Special Forces team. These Marines had trained specifically for boarding operations against Krell vessels. The intel provided by Dr. Rogers and the other survivors gives us an advantage, she told her soldiers. We know their ship layouts, their security protocols, and their tactical weaknesses. The Marines were equipped with advanced combat suits that enhanced strength and provided protection against Krell weapons. They carried non-lethal stun weapons as their primary armament, with lethal options as backup only. Our mission is to capture, not kill, Major Evans reminded them. President Martinez has been clear. We demonstrate to the galaxy that humans fight with restraint even when provoked. The Valor moved into position near a Krell military station that coordinated fleet movements for an entire sector. With the Communications hub disabled. This station was isolated and vulnerable. Boarding teams deploy, Major Evans ordered. The Marines launched from the Valor in boarding pods specially designed to penetrate Krell hull materials. The pods struck the station at calculated points, burning through the outer hull and creating entry points. Major Evans led the first team into the station. They moved through the corridors with practiced precision, encountering Krell security forces who seemed surprised by the attack. "They're disorganized," she observed as her team easily overwhelmed the first group of defenders using stun weapons. "They didn't expect us to counterattack so quickly, or so effectively." Throughout the station, similar scenes played out as the Marines secured section after section. Within 45 minutes, they controlled the entire facility. "Station secured," Major Evans reported to Admiral Grant. 67 Krell personnel captured, no casualties on either side. We have access to their tactical database. Back on the Defender, Admiral Grant allowed himself a small smile. The Krell had underestimated humanity's military capabilities, believing Earth to be primarily a diplomatic and scientific power. "Connect me to Dr. Kevin Howard," he instructed his communications officer. Dr. Howard was a xenobiologist who had studied Krell physiology and psychology for years. He had been brought into the operation to ensure that human forces understood how to effectively incapacitate Krell soldiers without killing them. "The non-lethal approach is working," Dr. Howard confirmed when the connection was established. "The Krell are soldier caste, bred to fight to the death against lethal force. But they have no cultural protocol for responding to an enemy that could kill them but chooses not to. It's creating confusion in their ranks," Admiral Grant observed. "More than confusion," Dr. Howard replied. "From the reports coming in, I believe it's causing a serious morale issue. Their entire military doctrine is based on the concept that other species are either threats to be eliminated or weaklings to be dominated. They don't know how to categorize us now." Admiral Grant turned to Lieutenant Commander Barnes. "What's the status of the Krell fleet?" "Scattered and uncoordinated," she reported. "Our initial strikes disabled their primary defense network. The few ships attempting to mount a resistance are operating independently, with no central command." Across the Krell space, Earth forces continued to execute their carefully planned strategy. Each strike was precise, targeting only military assets and avoiding civilian populations. Within 24 hours, Earth controlled the major military installations in 3 Krell sectors. "Admiral," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from Krell High Command." Admiral Grant straightened his uniform. "Put it through." A senior Krell military leader appeared on the screen, his scaled face showing what Dr. Howard had identified as signs of stress. "This is Commander Thax of the Krell Defense Forces," the Krell officer said. "Your attacks have violated our sovereignty. The Krell Dominion demands an immediate cessation of hostilities." Admiral Grant's expression remained neutral. "Commander Thax, I am Fleet Admiral Stephen Grant of the United Earth Space Command. Your forces fired upon an unarmed medical convoy with proper transit authorization, killing 347 civilians. Our response is both justified and restrained." "Those ships were violating," Commander Thax began. "We have provided conclusive evidence to the contrary," Admiral Grant interrupted, "including sensor logs, communication records, and visual data." The Admiral leaned forward slightly. "We have disabled your military capabilities while deliberately minimizing casualties. We could have chosen a different approach." Commander Thax seemed taken aback by this statement. "We demand to speak with your Supreme Leader Kazak," Admiral Grant continued. "Our terms are non-negotiable: acknowledgement of your unprovoked attack, surrender of those responsible, and reparations to the families of those killed." The Krell commander's vertical pupils narrowed. "I am not authorized to." "You have 12 hours to arrange this communication," Admiral Grant said firmly. "If Supreme Leader Kazak refuses to speak with us, we will continue our operations until the Krell Dominion no longer possesses any military capability whatsoever." As the transmission ended, Admiral Grant turned to his bridge crew. "Prepare for Phase 3. If they won't talk, we'll need to push deeper into their territory." The tactical display showed Earth forces already controlling significant portions of Krell space. The carefully executed plan was proceeding even more successfully than anticipated. The Krell made a fundamental error, Lieutenant Commander Barnes observed quietly. They thought attacking a medical convoy was their right as a dominant power. They never considered it might be the last mistake their empire would make. Admiral Grant nodded grimly. Earth went to war without reluctance. Now the Krell are learning what that truly means. They fired on a rescue convoy, and Earth went to war without reluctance. Part 5 Supreme Leader. Kazak of the Krell Dominion sat rigid in his command chair, his scaled face unreadable as he watched the holographic display showing the current state of the conflict. 2 weeks had passed since Earth launched its military response, and the situation for the Krell had become dire. Another defense station has fallen, reported his military advisor. The humans disabled its weapon systems and captured the crew, without a single casualty on either side. Kazak hissed softly, a sign of extreme frustration in Krell body language. The humans were not fighting as expected. Their precision strikes had systematically dismantled the Krell military infrastructure, while deliberately avoiding civilian targets. Most disturbing to the Krell leadership was the humans' bewildering tendency to capture rather than kill their enemies. "The humans request another communication with you, Supreme Leader," said his communications officer, keeping his eyes downcast. Kazak knew he could no longer avoid this conversation. Earth forces now controlled over 60% of Krell military installations. Their fleet had penetrated deep into Krell territory, and there was nothing left to stop them from striking at the Krell homeworld itself. "Put them through," he ordered. Turini. Holographic display shifted to show President Elaine Martinez of Earth. Her expression was stern but composed. "Supreme Leader Kazak," she acknowledged with a small nod. "I trust you now understand the severity of your government's actions against our medical convoy." Kazak struggled to maintain his dignified posture. "The Krell Dominion has ruled this sector for centuries. We have never faced such efficient opposition." "We did not seek this conflict," President Martinez reminded him. "But when your forces fired on an unarmed medical mission, you left us no choice but to respond." Ambassador Helen Carter stood beside the president. As Earth's diplomatic representative, she had prepared for this moment carefully. "Supreme Leader, we offer terms for the cessation of hostilities," Ambassador Carter said, her voice firm but not threatening. "First, the Krell Dominion must acknowledge the unprovoked nature of the attack on our medical convoy." Kazak's inner eyelids flickered, a sign of discomfort. "There was a misunderstanding about the nature of your vessels." "Second," Ambassador Carter continued, "those directly responsible for ordering and carrying out the attack must be surrendered to the Interstellar Tribunal for War Crimes." Kazak looked to his advisors, who nodded reluctantly. They had already identified Commander Vexar as the officer who had given the order to fire on the convoy. Sacrificing him might save the rest of the Krell leadership. Third, reparations must be paid to the families of those killed and to the colony on Proxima Centauri IV, which suffered additional casualties due to the delay in receiving medical assistance. "These terms are..." Kazak began to object. "Non-negotiable, President." Martinez finished for him. "We could continue our campaign until your entire military infrastructure is dismantled. Instead, we offer you a path to peace." Kazak knew when he was defeated. The humans had outmaneuvered the Krell at every turn. "We accept your terms," he said finally. "The attack was unauthorized. Commander Vexar and his officers will be surrendered to the tribunal. We will pay the required reparations." "A wise decision," President Martinez replied. "Ambassador Carter will coordinate the details of our agreement. Earth forces will withdraw from Krell territory once the terms are fulfilled." As the communication ended, Kazak turned to his advisors. "Prepare Commander Vexar for transfer to the humans, and summon our financial ministers to discuss these reparations." 1 week later on Earth, Chief Petty Officer Jason Murphy stood in the memorial garden, looking at the newly installed monument to those lost in the attack. His sister had been a nurse aboard the Asclepius. Her name was now etched in the gleaming black stone along with the other 346 victims. "I keep thinking about revenge," he admitted to Dr. Alan Rogers, who stood beside him. "Part of me wanted us to destroy the Krell completely for what they did." Dr. Rogers nodded in understanding. "I felt the same way at first. But what Earth did instead, showing restraint even when we had the power to obliterate them, that's actually more impressive." "The president called it justice, not vengeance," Jason said. "And that's what makes us different from the Krell," Dr. Rogers replied. "They saw our mercy mission as a target. We saw their military as an obstacle to be overcome, not a people to be destroyed." Across the garden, Ensign Maria Garcia was speaking with Ambassador Carter. Since being rescued, Maria had decided to train for diplomatic service, inspired by how Earth had handled the conflict. "The Krell representatives have signed the final agreement," Ambassador Carter told her. "Commander Vexar and 12 other officers will stand trial next month. The reparations will fund a new medical center on Proxima Centauri 4, named after Captain Miller." Maria looked over at the memorial. "Do you think it was worth it, going to war?" "We didn't choose war," Ambassador Carter replied. "But once it was forced upon us, we chose how to conduct it. That made all the difference." In orbit above Earth, President Martinez and Fleet Admiral Grant were touring the newly commissioned medical frigate Susan Miller, named after the captain, who had died activating the emergency beacon that provided crucial evidence of the Krell attack. "The Galactic Council has approved our request for a permanent peacekeeping force in the former Krell neutral zone," Admiral Grant informed the president. "It will ensure the Krell comply with the terms of the agreement." "And the new medical initiative?" President Martinez asked. 17 new medical frigates are being built, each named after one of the ships or crew members lost in the attack. They'll serve as rapid response vessels for emergencies throughout known space. President Martinez nodded with satisfaction. "Earth went to war without reluctance when justice demanded it, but we end this conflict on our terms with our values intact." Dr. Rogers and the other survivors of the Asclepius had requested permission to join the next medical mission to Proxima Centauri 4. Though the initial outbreak had been contained, the colony still needed support to fully recover. "Are you sure you want to go back out there so soon?" President Martinez had asked him during a private meeting. "That was our mission," Dr. Rogers replied simply. "To help those in need. What happened to us doesn't change that." On the day the new medical fleet departed Earth, thousands gathered to watch. The ships rose majestically from their docking bays, each one gleaming white with the universal medical symbol prominently displayed on their hulls. Standing on the observation deck of the Susan Miller, Dr. Rogers felt a mixture of emotions: grief for those lost, pride in how Earth had responded, and hope for the future. As the ships accelerated away from Earth, a message came through from President Martinez to all vessels. "You carry with you not just medicine and supplies, but the very best of humanity. Your mission of mercy continues, now protected by the knowledge that Earth stands firmly behind you." The galaxy had changed. Earth was no longer seen merely as a peaceful, diplomatic power, but as a force to be respected. And perhaps more importantly, as a civilization that fought when necessary but remained true to its highest principles even in war. The Krell had fired on a rescue convoy. Earth had gone to war without reluctance. And in victory, humanity had demonstrated a strength greater than weapons, the strength of justice tempered by mercy.